questions?
All right. Well, let me ask you a question, Phil.
Very good.
Where are we in the current real estate cycle?
The current real estate cycle, I think we're about to go into the mid-cycle slowdown. As you know, as you do the work on the flight plan and things, and then we put it all together.
Yeah.
We tried to tell people for a long time, these 20 and 60-year cycles, they tend to call things. It shows up. We've been saying that for quite a while.
Yeah.
Some years, in fact, actually. And what have we got now? All right, sure, it went on a month or so, but extra after January. But we gave that 20 and 60-year repeat for the top of the stock market in January. It looks like we've had a bit of a price overbalance going now. So I think the mid-cycle.
Is we're there.
So I think we're there. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's head to questions.
Okay. Do you want to send in a user?
Well, read out the question, Akhil. See what we got.
How do we view this week's activity? So I guess that's referring to the sharp sell-off in the stock market. You kind of hinted at it in the previous answer, but how do we put that in context of the mid-cycle and whether it's going to lead to a crash or?
Yeah, good question. I look at it only from perhaps a bigger picture viewpoint. Did you notice, if you take in the bigger picture of the last decade, right? We had a scenario, certainly, as I'm sure you'd well remember, 2013, 14, 15, people just couldn't get out of their heads the prior downturn. And, you remember all the conversation we had with people, the abolition of the US currency and the Greece was going to completely collapse.
Yeah.
And so we got through to 2016, 17, 18, and people were still remembering the prior downturn, really. And then along comes Mr. Trump, and bless his heart, he gave a great tax cut, and business sent it all back to their, not to their staff, but to the shareholders. But he has spent a goodly amount of time talking things up.
Yeah.
And I remember
the stock market.
Yes.
Yeah.
You and I talked about that. We gave talks back in November or so in Melbourne and Sydney, and we both pointed out that it was likely with this 20-60-year repeat, January, Mr. Trump would say it's the greatest economy, it's the best thing that's ever happened. He's the greatest president. You need to re-elect me to make sure this continues.
Yeah.
We said that you've got to look for the top then, and then what happens? Like he'd been talking it up. He had very well got rid of all people's prior fears, turned them into most bullish.
Yeah.
And then the economy, you've got to be ready to watch a turn.
Yeah.
And we told people to watch for something that might get people a little bit turned. I don't think the virus as such is it's not the thing, but you have to watch for something that turns the emotional stuff from the previous all blue sky.
Yeah.
And then suddenly
back to pessimism.
Back to a little bit pessimism, but suddenly what that does, in a fundamental point of view, it means that now there's a bit of a sell-off taking place. It means that all the existing valuations based on the blue sky now have to be slightly readjusted.
Yeah.
And after a 10, 9, 10, 11-year bull run, we're due a pause. It was time. I tried to tell people, I've got no idea. We've got no idea what might come over. We're due a pause.
Yeah.
It's that time in the cycle. We're due a pause.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're getting.
I think the only thing I'd add is that we kind of said this, look out for January, February for a potential top in the market in the 2020 flight plan. And
in the 2019 flight
plan. And in 2019 as well. And it's been amazing to see how it's repeated. And what's quite interesting also, just that Trump called and told everyone that they should be buying stocks because he's such a great president.
Yes.
The economy is doing so well. And I don't know if you noticed that the number 2 at Ray Dalio's hedge fund also said that, in Davos just a few weeks ago that the business cycle had been eliminated. It's not just, the average investor that's sort of fallen for it. It's even some of the richest people on the planet. So it's quite interesting to see the psychology
and kind of great signs of what comes in. I mean, as you know, we've tried to point some of this out before. That's what you watch for. It was all there. It was all there.
Absolutely. Okay. The next question is Phil from Shane Maloney. Phil, you said 2 years ago that farms were on a 30-year cycle. Where are we in the cycle now?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point. We are talking when we talk about real estate 18.6. It is city based. It's residential, commercial, urban, and things. Yeah, we forget often talking about farming and things. And of course, it's not just farming. There are cities in Australia, some regional centres, that are dependent on what you might call commodities, farming and various things. Yes, that goes back to what's a commodity cycle. Akhil's a specialist in that. That's the whole K-wave stuff. 60-year wave, 30 years of prices up, 30 years of down. I think it'd be fair to say the downward movement of the usual K-wave commodity prices terminated around about 1999.
Yeah,
thereabouts, the last half of the 1990s.
Yeah,
history would say you'd be expecting 30 years up. And I think we're about halfway through, maybe a bit more than half, taking up to 2026. We'd be expecting things.
Yeah.
Of course, we are talking more about that in our class coming up in Melbourne tomorrow and Sydney on Sunday. It'd be about right, I think.
I think so.
Real farming stuff.
I mean, the only other thing I'd add is that within the broad 60-year long wave, Kondratiev wave, K-wave, you also get sort of 30-year sort of cycles. And on that basis, it was always calling for the 2000s to be very bullish for commodities, things to be a bit mixed this decade, and then the uptrend into the peak of the long wave to resume early next decade. That's right, early this decade, sorry, we're now 2020, with a potential peak in sort of 26, 27.
Yeah, well, I hope that makes sense for the person coming.
Well, or watch the session tomorrow if you can, if you're a subscriber to Property Sharemarket Economics.
It's booked out.
Well, they're able to purchase access to the video, but I think we go through this forecast in some detail, so hopefully you'll get.
You want to read that?
Okay, so another question on the coronavirus: is it trigger for the mid-cycle top? We sort of
I think we slightly covered that before. It's just suggesting there'll be a reappraisal of valuations now, and I think already in the stock market, I think on the Dow at least, from what I saw, it does now look like there's been an overbalance of price, perhaps not time yet. So that indicates that the next high in the Dow will be a probable lower top, some weeks away, and then to move down further.
Okay. So Darren Jones, with all the money that's already been injected by central banks to recover from the crisis of 2008, where will the money come for the last part of the current real estate cycle?
Oh, you're a specialist in credit and banking. You put that very well in Perth. That actually really, you explained it really well. And you should say it again. Let me prompt you. You suggested that after the GFC, the money that the banks printed, they actually didn't print enough. It actually wasn't as much as you think it is. That was a good point. People might not understand. Decreation of money and creation. Good point. I think you remember that.
Yeah. So I mean, sort of very briefly, and sort of banking and money gets a little complicated. Try to keep it simple. So banks in our current system create the money supply effectively, and during the boom of the 2000s, a lot of the money they created ended up in the land market. It also always does.
Yes.
And so when the land market collapsed after 2008, a lot of money that had gone into the land market was then effectively destroyed. What central banks tried to do through quantitative easing was to replace that lost money by printing a lot of it and trying to pump it into the economy. Unfortunately, we've found that a lot of that money they printed didn't go back into the economy. It basically ended up in financial assets, which is why we've had low growth, but also low inflation, because it hasn't increased the money supply overall. Where does the money come from for the second half of the real estate cycle? Well, it's the same as the last cycle, which is basically banks will get around the regulations that were put in place after 2008. They'll start lending more freely, and again, it will end up in the land market. So there are always sources of credit, and I think this cycle we're seeing new forms of technology also helping to channel money into the real estate cycle, from crowdfunding through cryptocurrencies and other sort of new forms, and even in fact companies like Apple and Google and Amazon are trying to take a share of financial services market. So there's plenty of sources of additional capital.
Yeah, so Akhil, you have to write a book about that. You're going to put that in your next thing, but it's just
Currently writing a book.
Just a point that's not really understood.
Absolutely.
There wasn't, people think there was this awesome amount of money created after the so-called GFC, but in actual fact, it really wasn't. It's not quite what people think. It's not quite what it seems.
Yeah, I think a lot of the news and so on has been misleading on that, and so yeah, people have been looking in the wrong direction.
Yes, yeah, agreed.
Where do you see the Perth property markets in the context of the 18.6-year cycle, considering the long-term decline in property prices there since the mining boom?
Yeah, well, again, since the mining boom, we put out a theoretical framework which does actually show how things really work of real estate in an 18.6-year cycle. But you have to take that knowledge, and then there are regional influences, which we've always tried to point out, and you have to apply the regional influences to be street smart to the actual whole cycle. So again, my thoughts on that would be that at the end, most places tie in at the finish at the extreme. I'd be expecting markets like Perth and things to have a decent 2020s, but they'll all finish at the boom. They'll all everything comes into the boom. Yeah. But you have to be street smart about this. There are regional differences and town differences and things. You do have to understand that.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognise that while property does follow this cycle, it doesn't mean that every single city and every single location in the property market is going to be the same. You have to. The property is a local asset.
Yes.
You've got to recognise that different properties on the same street might be valued differently just because of specific factors. We've got a question now which brings in another cycle that we've written about. So how will the next lower top, which we referred to in a previous answer, in the Dow correlate with the presidential cycle this year? Just quickly cover the presidential cycle and then kind of.
Well, there's another point as well. We should draw out. If we are talking about the stock market as indicative of a mid-cycle slowdown. The stock market can easily have a panic, or the stock market can easily have a 1-year decline, because over the last couple of years, the stock market's probably got ahead of itself on a valuations earnings basis, or a bit unrealistic. And so you can still have stock markets doing poorly or just treading water, doing nothing for a year and a half. Yeah. It doesn't have to affect the real estate market, and it's rare for mid-cycle slowdowns to be affecting what happens in the real estate market. We were talking stock markets. We know from our financial timetable work that the stock markets do some sort of panic pullback this year. So we've been saying that for years. You have to start expecting that to occur.
I think so. Just on the presidential cycle, you tend to find when the incumbent US president is running for re-election that the US government is pumping a lot of money into the economy, and that's obviously generally very bullish for markets. Having said that, it's not always the case that stock markets go up, particularly when you are at a specific point in the cycle. And in fact, last 20 years ago, during the last cycle, the year 2000, even though Al Gore was running on the back of Bill Clinton's presidency, but the stock market kind of went sideways. There's a bit of panic in there as well. So.
Yes, and keeping in mind, we do pay a lot of attention to the 20 and 60-year cycles. That takes into account presidential years, because there are 4 years. So
it all kind of fits in together.
It just all kind of fits in together. So there'll be a lot of government spending in the US this year. There's a census that they've got to do. You've got a president there that's probably, if this is possible, more keen than any politician in history to get back for another 4 years, and he'll be doing everything possible. There's a lot of stuff that they've still got ability to do in the US. Over the course of the year, the US could easily drop interest rates. I can see the president strong arming the Fed in an unusual fashion, which isn't normal, but those things can happen. The presidential year, it looks shaping up as a strong year presidential-wise, and that again, the way we would look at things, that fits into what you'd probably see, which I pointed out in many talks over the last year or two. You're then coming up after 2020 is a year ended in one. The lows normally are year ended in one.
Yeah.
So,
like 2001.
Yes, 2001. Yes.
Had a significant low.
Yeah. So, and that's 20 years. Yes. Yeah. So 2011, you have to read within the point of being higher lows. So it's 2021 mid-cycle slowdown type low. So I think it's all fitting together well enough. I'm confident of the low coming in 2021, and the presidential year keeping things slightly buoyant at the moment. Of course, whatever president comes in, even a new one, you can see all the policies, all the rough stuff, tough stuff coming out 2021, which just would keep markets lower.
It's consistent with the presidential cycle.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. So what are your thoughts on the gold price? Some commentators are talking the start of a big bull run for the next few years. Is it already too late to get in with the current run it has had?
I'm handing that to Akhil. May I say, I'm not a gold bug.
Nor am I. Nor am I, say as well.
I'm not bullish, ugly bullish on gold. I think we're in slightly deflationary environments, and the slowdown coming will add to that. And I don't see gold as being a holdable. It's just my opinion. I'm not big on the gold in deflationary type environments, but that doesn't mean it can't outperform. But you're the.
Well, I mean, I think I'd make a sort of a very general point, is that over the long term, gold and other commodities are quite well correlated. So the gold cycle follows the commodity cycle, and we've just said that we expect the 2020s to be a strong decade for commodities, and I'd expect gold to be part of that.
Yes.
In fact, even given what's happened over the last sort of few months, maybe even leading that. I think the really best time to be investing in gold is when there's a lot of uncertainty about the financial system, which you typically get in the run up to the end of the cycle. So in the 2020s, I would be certainly looking at gold. I'm not convinced entirely that with so many people talking up gold and talking down the economy in general at a time in the cycle where things aren't really that bearish, that gold is at the moment a very long-term play. But that being said, there is enough panic around in the markets that every time you get a piece of bad news, there seems to be a bit of a surge in the gold price. So you have to take into account that might happen for during the rest of the year if there's another stock market panic later on. So Gan mentioned many time counts in his books. You tend to talk about just 2 or 3, 20 and 60. Can you explain why? That's an interesting question.
Yes.
I've done a bit of reading of Gan. This is Philip.
Well, they were, I'm not sure I can say why in one sense, but Mr. Gann did mention they were his important cycles, 20 and 60 in one sense. It does bring together a lot of other things like the presidential cycle and one or two others that seem to coalesce around 20 and 60. I mean, I could go into the esoteric side. I'm not sure I can go there today.
Public events.
Yes, but you could look at some of the esoteric and planetary timing type things that will take you on the 20 and 60. There's good reasons for it. However, let me give an example. It's not 20 and 60. We're looking at mainly longer term scenarios, years, when we come to the flight plan. However, we've had a fairly significant top on the Australian market February 20th. The Dow was February 11th. So what you can do, just to test out the other numbers, what you can do for this year, for those who are listening, take those 2 dates and count 30, 60, 90 around the circle off those 2 dates and see what happens. And generally, Gan would have said that there'd be further emotional events tied to those particular dates. In that instance, you don't look at 20 and 60. You're counting 30, 60, 90 not 20 around a circle. So
Yeah.
it's horses for courses. You've got to be careful. You've got to relate it to the relevant scenario.
Yeah, I mean, just for clarity, for those of you who haven't studied a lot of GAN, when Phil says count around the circle, you divide the year into a circle, and 360 degrees is all circles are, and that roughly 1 degree is 1 day, so 30 degrees forward is 30 days roughly. Yeah. So you'd be looking for March the 11th or March the 20th, which is actually also, for another reason, a good sort of time frame for potential market.
Indeed. So the market is already setting up from February 20th. The market is we already know that September, the equinoxes, September, December, are going to be important. The market has just told you the equinox dates are very important. One of the most important dates will be 7 months off February 20. So if you're wanting to learn a bit about GAN, you'll start to see it live this year.
Okay. How do we think of the all odds? Will it follow the US markets down as well? Maybe just briefly.
The all odds are not going to go up if the Dow's going down like it is, like it has. So you can see the correlation.
Mm-hmm.
But years ended in zero in Australia, as we've highlighted and we've pointed out. I think it's on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Years ended in zero in Australia are generally ending the year higher than they started. Not by much, but a little. So years ended in zero in Australia are generally not that bearish, whereas they can be a bit more bearish in the US. The correlation's normal, but it doesn't, the Australian market didn't go up as much, anywhere near as high as what other markets around the world have done. So on that basis, I wouldn't be suggesting that it would fall as much either. Sideways, pretty much. I'm not that bullish on the Australian stock market. People have known that for years. I just don't think Australia produces much at the moment. Sideways.
Okay. Sure. Okay, we'll go into sort of a technology-related question. So what's your thoughts on the electric vehicle battery revolution heading into 2026?
Akhil, you're a young bloke. You got all that?
Well, I mean, look, there's several levels to that. So one is the sort of demand for commodities that electric vehicles and batteries will clearly require, which should be very bullish for companies that have access to those resources. I definitely think electric vehicles are going to be a very big part of our transportation future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the cost of fueling those is far lower than petrol cars, and the efficiency of those models. What you do need is the infrastructure for charging stations and being able to get around. And so that actually is not unrelated to the real estate cycle, because obviously you need the network of sort of battery stations where people are located. So there'll be both, I think, a technological play as well as a real estate play going into 2027. I suspect that the story is going to be very big.
Yes, yeah, well, it's not, but ultimately, you don't hear this very often. You always hear this from us.
Yes.
Don't forget, the gains ultimately are taken by the land price.
Indeed. Yeah.
So it's also it's just not a technological question. It's land price and location as well.
Okay.
In fact, I was asked today, we were doing a bit of stuff today. I just had one question I was related. The question came to me about Phil, if you knew back then what I know now, and it comes to mind, when I was a kid growing up, I used to watch where the petrol stations go in. I'm Melbourne and used to drive down with the folks who would drive down to Phillip Island. And on the road down there, you would see that a service station would go in absolutely, it was just on a corner of some dirt road and the main highway.
Yeah.
Now that is the service station owners. They're planning ahead 20 years to take the best location. So if you want to see that live and real now, you would watch where the locations go in for electric charging. Because they're placed where the biggest demand is. Location. So that's applying what I learned, what I should know now, what I learned back then.
Very good. Well, what do we think about crypto?
I get asked that a bit. well, if you want to play crypto and trade that, that's great. I think that's a young man's game. But
got to be resilient.
Yes,
very volatile.
yes. But the backing behind it, the blockchain and things, is real. And I think you'll find the blockchain stuff will be applied most logically for biggest gain by the banks and the real estate to allow better title. And as land price goes higher and higher, aka house prices, but it's the land underneath, remember, as that goes higher, we're going to have to look for more and more creative ways to be able to afford to buy in, and this is where blockchain will apply. You'll see that develop over the coming decade and beyond.
I mean, I don't believe the hype around sort of Bitcoin as a future reserve currency. I mean, as a reserve currency, it's currently a terrible idea. But the technology, so what it enables people to do, both to own smaller fractions of land or houses rather, I think is potentially very bullish for the property market. And the second thing is, it will potentially speed up the transaction, so i.e. making the buying and selling much easier, which I don't think, at least my experience in the UK, it's a fiendishly difficult and complicated and lengthy, inefficient process. Whereas the potential for the blockchain could speed up the buying and selling of a house to maybe less than 24 hours, which would be pretty revolutionary.
And in identifiable shares.
Exactly. So it could push the cycle into overdrive if that comes in the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The future is hydrogen. That's where the US market is going. For even Bill Gates has just ordered a hydrogen-powered super yacht. That's interesting news. I haven't sort of heard that. I'm not sure I've got anything to add.
Yeah, I've followed that a little bit. Interesting question. It raises the potential for more disruption. Just thinking off the top of my head, which is probably fairly obvious, if it provided energy that was a bit, well, not a bit, but is free, potentially, nothing's ever free, that would be disruptive to the utilities companies that are listed. You'd have to see how that played out. And the obvious thing, of course, if power became free, it doesn't mean you're going to save any money. If power becomes free, you're just going to end up having to pay more for your house. It's as simple as that. So I wouldn't start getting into how good this is. It's just going to create more economic rent. Simple as that.
Sorry, just can I add one point to that, and that is that we are talking about a potential revolution in the way that we generate energy, and that will require sort of a whole economy build out of new power stations and solar panels and renewables and all the rest of it, and that is potentially very bullish for the economy, for markets, because it involves so much investment. So that again sort of reinforces the case that the second half of the real estate cycle will be really big.
This is the last question.
Last question. Okay, so this was from Michael, who was a bit late coming to the event. Is Australia in the mid-cycle correction or the start of the next phase? Also, do you think 2026 is still the top, or could it go into 2028?
Well, again, I don't think we need to start worrying too much about those dates yet. Yes, the mid-cycle slowdown, it's been due. And, I have to say, with all sincerity, it was telegraphed. You just look at a 20-60-year cycle, and all the pointers I gave to you about Mr. Trump, rah-rah in January, February, great signs of a top in the making. We are due a pause, and if you look at history, the years ended in 0, years ended in 1. That's when the pauses come. We're mid-cycle. It's due. It's happening in front of us. As to the extremes, I don't. At the end of the cycle, I don't get too wrapped up about 2026, 2020 extensions. If you've read my book, if you've followed some of what we do, and if it's just plain common sense, the market will tell us. As we go into 2023, 24, 25, 26, eventually will tell us. Just like what they told us in the last year and a half. I don't think this was hard to identify. It didn't give us the exact top. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it told us the exact day. It didn't. But just as a general, half-yearly overview, I think it'll be the similar going into extremes. I think there'll be events take place. But remember, and I don't know, just completely off the top of my head, right? Thinking that applying all of the technology that we've got, blockchain, you've been able to buy 1/25th of a house in clear identity pattern, in clear title and stuff.
Yeah. If
Mr. Trump does get re-elected, who's to say, if, for example, if Mr. Trump, after 2024, he manages to get his daughter or his son elected as president, Mr. Trump goes off into wherever he needs to go off to. Don't be surprised if, for example, the end of 2025, beginning of 2026, Mr. Trump announces that he's going to build a Trump Tower on Mars, and all his followers should invest, and they'll be able to buy 1/25th of one floor of his tower. That'll be the top.
Yeah.
I don't believe it will be hard to identify. At that time, you've just got to know your cycle, and you do the opposite to everybody else, because everybody else will get suckered in. It'll come out in the news ahead. Just coming back to the current, in the news ahead, the next month or two, newspaper articles will come out to show that all the big top end and all the mums and dads, they're all buying in the last 3 or 4 months. Okay, and it's just got everybody in. Now, that's easy in hindsight, but
that's also a repeated history.
Yes. And the 20 and 60 year cycle told you to be aware of around this time.
Very good.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, I think that's been a really interesting conversation. Thanks to everyone for your excellent questions. I hope we covered a broad range of them.
We should do that again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.